Hello and welcome to Never Is Now, ADL's signature summit on anti-Semitism and hate. And a special welcome to our student track specifically designed for high school students and educators. My name is Celeste Stewart, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for our opening session, CHUTZ POW, Comic Books as a Force for Social Good. I want to quickly remind you of the exclusive access you have through the student track, not just to this opening panel, but also to tomorrow night's student panel, How I Became a Changemaker, and full access to BNAW, ADL's digital interactive anti-Semitism education course for high school students that helps build empathy and allyship. Please don't forget to ask questions by clicking on the Q&A button to the right of the video. Please type questions throughout the panel. We'll select a few of those to ask the panelists after the initial discussion is complete. So before I introduce our incredible speaker, I'd like to turn it over to our CEO and National Director, Jonathan Greenblatt, for a brief welcome. Jonathan, go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Celeste. And hello to all the high school students and educators who are tuned in this evening. I am so excited to welcome you to our special student track of Never Is Now, which in addition to having access to the whole summit, includes special panels and content that we've created just for you. We believe that having a student track at Never Is Now is essential because let's face it, you're the change makers of today and tomorrow. Your generation is tenacious and stops at nothing. Literally nothing stands in your way. And I sincerely respect that and look forward to seeing the amazing accomplishments each one of you will make in your schools and communities. And hopefully this conference is going to give you some ideas, some inspiration, some energy to drive that forward. Because we know that each of you holds the power for social change, the limitless potential to shape the future, which will be a future of activism and achievement if the adults will get out of the way and let you do your thing. So thanks to all of you, and especially I want to express my gratitude to all of the teachers and the educators for shaping you into the people, the heroes you are today. So look, we've got some great panels that we exclusively developed for you, starting with this evening with our incredible speaker, Marcel Walker, who's going to talk with us about how he's used comics to achieve social good. And look, I'll confess, as a lifelong comic book fan myself, for me, it all started with Superman and the X-Men, really Beast and Wolverine. I am so delighted that we've got Marcel this evening as we step into the proverbial multiverse over the next few days as Never Is Now really takes off. And by the way, if you haven't yet seen the Eternals, I am not going to spoil the post-credits scene for you, but you better stick around till the very end. Anyways, then tomorrow night, you're going to get to hear from 4 students just like you who've become agents for social change. So I hope to see you there and encourage all of you to join us for the whole summit, which we hope will inspire you to continue to take action, to stand up against bias and all forms of hate, and to, again, get the inspiration and the ideas to be the allies and change makers that I know you are. So once again, welcome to Never Is Now's high school student track, and thank you for your courage and your leadership and for joining us as we fight hate for good. Back to you, Celeste.
You're absolutely right. We have such a great lineup for our students and educators, so let's get started. I'm so pleased to introduce Marcel Walker, comic book creator, arts educator, and project director for CHUTZ POW, Superheroes of the Holocaust. CHUTZ POW, published by the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, is an anthology comic book series that illustrates the stories of several heroic survivors who displayed incredible feats of courage, resilience, and sacrifice during the Holocaust. Marcel will dive into how we can use art forms like comic books as a way to inspire social change. Marcel, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and thanks to our hosts at ADL for inviting me to speak with you. It's both a pleasure and an honor to be presenting at this year's Never Is Now Summit. I was asked to come and talk about my work as an artist and with the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, and I jumped at the chance to be included, partly because of the company I'm in at this summit. The folks here at ADL are wonderful to work with, and the other speakers are extraordinary. But also because I have the chance to connect with all of you. I'm especially grateful to all the high school students in attendance today and over the next 2 days. You're the ones who recognize that dismantling anti-Semitism is our shared duty toward building the better, more equitable world of tomorrow. I've put together a presentation to share with you to aid me in talking about my background, my work as an artist, and the comic book I currently work on, CHUTZ POW, Superheroes of the Holocaust. I'll also be discussing a little of the history of comics, relationship with social awareness and responsibility. Afterwards, we'll have time for a few questions, and I hope you enjoy my talk and that you're ready to take a few notes. So here we go. The first thing I would like to do is I want to give you an acknowledgement of comics history of non-inclusivity. The presentation you're about to watch contains information from an abridged history of comic books, which spans nearly 90 years. Women, people of color, and other groups of people weren't allowed to participate in the medium, especially in its primacy. So understand that they've always been present as creators and readers in unheralded and often important roles, which continue to come to light. I encourage you to seek out information about the people and characters whose experiences aren't reflected today. Their contributions were every bit as valuable. So there are three things I want you to remember today, and this will be repeated throughout the presentation and will serve as the framework of what's to follow. Comics have always been for everyone. Comics are literature, and comics foster communication through engagement. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to mention this, and you will see this reflected in what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to be telling you more about me, then Superman and the history of comics. Then I'll tell you about CHUTZ POW in more detail and walk you through one of our stories while telling you how it came to be. So again, I want to thank you for coming to listen to me today. My name is Marcel Walker, and I'm a graphic prose, aka comic book artist and creator. So graphic prose, I will use this term back and forth with comics. Graphic prose is what I use to refer to comics. When I talk about graphic prose, I'm talking about the actual artwork that gets created, both the stories and the visual art that you see. So I use this term to separate it from the media, which is comics, because often there's confusion about what to call a thing. Are they comics? Are they graphic novels? I've heard floppies used. Just so you know, when I refer to graphic prose, I'm talking about the actual artwork that's done. Comic books is one means of expression. So graphic prose can be used and be printed in comic books. It can be printed in graphic novels. It can be printed on web comics or comic strips. But if I will refer to them as comics as well, because that's a traditional name and it's totally fine. Just know that that's what I'm talking about. I'm a writer, artist, and illustrator by profession. I've taught comic book art and writing to students of all ages as well for over 25 years. I know it's hard to believe looking at me, but it's true. I'm not only a graphic prose creator, I'm an advocate for comic books and their power to change lives. I'm hoping to get some of you curious about the joy and power of comics today too. As much as I love art, I love words, and I'm all about capturing the exact meaning of words. I try to think very carefully about the words that get incorporated into my artwork. Because every single word has specific meaning. I actually have a favorite word, which I don't share with many people because I don't want them to get the meaning wrong. But today is a special day, you're special attendees, and I want to share it with you later. But be ready for it because I promise that it's special. You probably haven't heard it used before, and it'll be worth the wait. For nearly 5 years, I've been working as the CHUTZ POW project coordinator for the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. I have primary oversight of our self-published educational comic book, CHUTZ POW. I'm primarily a content creator, and I facilitate communication and factual information about the Holocaust as the resident comic book authority. I didn't start out in this role, though. My relationship with the Holocaust Center began with me working as a freelance graphic prose, aka comic book artist, here in sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is a photo of me from a few years ago when we only had 2 issues of our series published. We now have 4. You can tell this was a few years ago because I had hair then. I never would have imagined myself with a job like the one I have now, which I'll tell you more about. But I always knew I wanted to make comic books, starting when I was about 6 years old. These are some of the comics I owned when I was a kid. Front and center in my collection from the beginning was Superman. Now, I've always been captivated by Superman, a character that, like many of the most popular and enduring superheroes in comics, had Jewish creators, which I was unaware of when I was younger. It's fair to say that this cultural influence was my most direct link to Jewish culture for years. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were the writer and artist, respectively, and co-creators of Superman. Both were Jewish children of immigrants. They were both mild-mannered, and they loved what we now refer to as geek culture. It provided escapism from their daily hardships. Siegel's father died as a result of an armed robbery at his business in Cleveland, Ohio. And they created Superman while they were still in high school. So I want you to know that they started early, just like you. And they started that with fairly modest expectations. They wanted to make comics to support their families and become successful and popular. They ended up creating a symbol so powerful that it kickstarted an industry and even threatened the Third Reich. The drawing here is from a 2-page story they created, published in the February 27, 1940 edition of Look magazine. It drew attention from Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, and they actually insulted the creators, Siegel and Shuster, over its use. So that's how powerful their creation was. When I was young, my home life was very unstable for a number of reasons. Comics shaped my perspective on the world and kept me sane. There were also real-life superheroes who I admired, very close to me. Fred Rogers was here. He made his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was created and broadcast here in Pittsburgh. He was from Pittsburgh. I watched that show every day as a child. And what you see in the picture next to that, that's a photo of my mother on the left and my Aunt Myrtle, her sister, on the right. It's a very big family. These are my mom, obviously, and my Aunt Myrtle were the ones who I was the closest with. I lived with Aunt Myrtle for off and on. I find myself reflecting on these folks you see in this picture overall every single day. Fred Rogers was a superhero who wore his cape as a sweater. And I quote my mother and my Aunt Myrtle, who is very funny all the time. So these were the primary heroes I encountered in my home. But there were other heroes here in Pittsburgh, activists and civil rights pioneers. Right here you see Nate Smith, who championed for Black people to be able to join local unions, and attorney Bird Brown, who had been doing hard work for social issues and social causes before I was even born. I got to meet both of them when I had first entered the workforce at my first job, and I had no idea of the work they'd done. I didn't really know who they were. That came later. And these are just two of many local superheroes to be found in my community here in Pittsburgh. And I wanted to pay tribute to them for the work that they've done on all of our behalves, Black, white, and everybody. And then there are larger cultural heroes who we all share. I was born 2 years into a post-Martin Luther King Jr. world, but his influence and that of those who followed his path of activism continues to be felt far and wide. His influence was also recognized by comics creators very early on. Comic books as a social force, and remember, comics are literature, was recognized in the comic book The Montgomery Story, which was published in December 1957. This was, in many respects, the most important comic book in American history. Certainly, in my opinion, it's the most important comic book in American comic book history. Its instructional nature paved the way for comics to be utilized for education and as a force for social good. I have to say, this comic book literally saved people's lives. It told the story of the Montgomery bus boycotts, and it gave instruction to future activists who wanted to get involved in the movement for things that they could do to stay safe when they were in the movement. So I mean that book saved lives. So it is vitally important in the history of comics and in our civil rights movement. So that the Montgomery story inspired a lot of people, including Congressman John Lewis, who later on produced with a writer and artist his own graphic novel series that told his autobiography, his life story. And it talked about his call to duty. And it all started because of a comic book. He got his copy of the Montgomery story directly from Martin Luther King Jr., who he worked very, very closely with during the civil rights era of the 1950s and 1960s. And it left a deep impression on him. I know this to be a fact for one very simple reason. He told me so in person. So, this is a photo taken with me and John Lewis about 5 years ago. He was a wonderful individual. He had an amazingly calm presence. He talked about his session very, very directly. And I can't tell you what it did for me and those around him to spend some time in his presence. And I got to hear him say the words, "A comic book changed my life." That is enormous catalytic power. So I knew comics changed my life. They also changed his. I just wanted to include this to demonstrate how important and impressive comic books can be on our lives and have been to everyone's lives. So the Montgomery story, like I said, is, in my opinion, the single most important comic published in America. There have been many, many books that have told the stories of many, many social and cultural revolutions in this country. That have documented American history, global history. It is just one of many. It is a pioneer for this. But another one that is very important that I want to also talk about is Mouse by Art Spiegelman. So this book was published. It was originally published in serialized form, the story that it includes, and it was later collected and published in graphic novel format. It was the first work of graphic prose to win a Pulitzer Prize. And it is, I can't stress how important this book is in my field where I work. This gets referenced all the time, particularly in Holocaust education. My world intersects comics and Holocaust education. Mouse gets referenced all the time because it is used so frequently towards this end. But it's not the only work of literature. Remember, comics are literature. It's not the only work of literature that gets referenced. What you're looking at now are the three most popular works of literature that get referenced in Holocaust education, referenced and used. So it's Mouse by Art Spiegelman, The Diary of Anne Frank, and Night by Elie Wiesel. These books are so popular, even if you don't know, if you haven't read them, you're probably familiar with them, at least some of them, and at least by their titles. They're enormously popular. They've been used in Holocaust-related curriculums in schools for decades and decades, and they rightly should be. They are great books. But they weren't created with scholastic applications in mind. Mouse was created, all three of those books were created as memoirs. They were created as personal memoirs and adapted for scholastic use. So they were used in schools. The book I work on now, the comic book series we work on now here at the Holocaust Center, was created to do the next thing, which is these are biographies. It contains biographies that were created for scholastic use, but they're made accessible to general readers. So meaning these comics were created to be used in schools, but everybody can read them and hopefully get something out of them. That was the goal from the inception of CHUTZ POW. That remains the goal with this project. So each issue that we produce has an individual theme. There's the overarching themes of resistance, resilience, and identity. So you can find those in pretty much every single story in the series. But each individual's issues, themes, well, they break down like this. Right now, the first issue is the Upstanders, which introduces readers to the overall themes that you will find in and just the myriad experiences of Holocaust survivors. You have people who were in camps, labor camps, death camps. You have people who joined resistance movements. You have people who had to take assumed identities. So that first issue really gets people involved and gets them acclimated to the landscape. The second issue, and also the first issue, focused on people from here in Pittsburgh, members of our immediate survivor community. Volume 2, International Heroes, pulled the lens back and looked at people from a more global perspective, most of whom were in the European theater during World War II. We had our footing under us by the time we did that one, so I think it's a more assured book. Volume 3, we focus that lens in again. We come back to people here in Pittsburgh, survivors here in Pittsburgh, and we focus on the stories of people who had been children during the Holocaust, children and youth. Our most recent issue, Volume 4, focuses on women's stories and the specificity of what they had to endure and deal with during the Holocaust. I love them all the way you love your kids, the way your parents say they love you, because I know they do. You love them each for different reasons, and you love them each one that you're working on at the time. So if anybody ever asks me, what's your favorite book? It's always going to be the one that I'm working on at that time. Sorry, it's taking a moment for this to advance. Okay. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you should. I'm trying to get to a slide that will show you some of the creators who have worked on CHUTZ POW. So we have a number of creators that work on this book. Oftentimes I get referenced as the only creator on CHUTZ POW. I am not. I assure you, I am not the only creator on this series. I've lost track of how many people have worked on CHUTZ POW at this point, but it's an enormous team that we have. Hopefully the photo will pop up here at some point. They are a wonderful group of creators, writers, and artists who have worked on this series since day one. They give all of what they have to this series, men and women. It is a very inclusive and diverse group of creators that work on this. I can't say enough about them. You should be seeing photos. One of the main photos here is my co-creator, Wayne Wise, who has also worked on this project. And Wayne actually named the CHUTZ POW project. Wayne has written the majority of the stories that are found in CHUTZ POW, and he's actually in the room with me right now, kind of cheering me on. So he says hi. This series, I can't say enough about it, what it does and what we've been able to accomplish, how it's been able to hit its goals. I apologize if you're not able to see these slides as intended, so I'm going to give them a moment to hopefully catch up here. There will be a slide that features some of the artwork with CHUTZ POW. There's like I said, numerous artists, numerous writers. I think it's coming up right now that have worked on this series. I am often referenced as a creator. I was technically one of the creators, but I'm a co-creator. Every issue that we produce, we have new creators that work on it. Some of the creators that have worked on it include, let's see, I'm just going to rattle off some names here. Yona Harvey, Vince Dorsey, Yang Zen Lee, Louis Brahm, Mark Zingarelli, and Wayne Wise, as I mentioned, and Erica Chan. These are all wonderful professional creators who contribute to what we call the CHUTZ POW aesthetic. So I'm going to now walk through a CHUTZ POW story with you. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly because we're also going to save some time here towards the end for some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those for you. But I want to walk through a story that I worked on with CHUTZ POW so you can see exactly what this series entails. So this story is called Parallel Choices. It tells the dual stories of the Barans, Moshe Baran and Malka Baran, who met after their experiences during the Holocaust. They often would talk about their stories with audiences together. So Wayne and I chose to tell their stories in sync together, and it will go back and forth, and you will see one person's life, and then you will see the other person's. Let's see. So I'm just going to start you in it right now. So what you see here, we framed this story. Wayne wrote this entire script, and then I saw what he was doing, so I had a window into it as he was beginning. We framed the script with them actually addressing an audience, in this case, the reader, because like I said, they actually talked to people and talked about their story. So we see Moshe and Malka respectively at podiums, and they're talking about their experiences in their shtetls in Poland. And this is reformatted. What you're seeing is reformatted from the comic book page. So the first group of slides you're going to see all is one page, and it's a slightly different experience seeing it this way, but I think it's actually really cool. So we go back and forth. So this is Moshe talking about when his family was taken away from their village by the Nazis, and then we go to Malka, who talks about her much the same experience. They did not know each other at this point, and they were in separate shtetls, but their paths then diverged even more. Moshe was relocated to Camp Hordok. He was put on a work camp where he was made to work extremely hard, but he did not want to die in the camp. Malka, she was separated from her family, and she was taken to a women's camp. Her family, all of her family perished. And she just existed as one among millions, just a number. And I should also mention, we did not have but so many references when we worked on this series, and we still at times don't. So the job of the artist, as one of our survivors mentioned, is to kind of fill in those gaps and use our talents to fill in the gaps when we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have cameras everywhere. We weren't able to record what everybody looked like or what every place looked like or what things were. So we're able to use a lot of our resources. We go back. There's a lot of research that's done for every single CHUTZ POW story to try and fill them in reasonably and depict these stories how they most likely would have happened. So I can tell you right now, this is my artwork that you're looking at. So we move back to Miché's story where he talks about the resistance fighters that were nearby and how that they would let you join their group if you could bring them weapons. So he knew of weapons. So he was able to smuggle some out of a warehouse that had been dismantled into the ghetto, out of the ghetto, and to them so they could be reassembled there. But they didn't know where they were at. There was a woman who did know where they were at, but would not take him unless she was able to smuggle her and her children out of the ghetto. So you see them coming to that decision to take her. You see Miché taking her and her children out under cover of night. They escape under a barbed wire fence. And again, there was no reference, but I had to go by other accounts and information that I had on hand to try and depict this as realistically as I could. Also, there was a lot of dialogue back and forth between myself and Wayne to make sure that we could get this as right as we could and as right as it felt. He walked all night with them through the forest, and in the morning they emerged from the forest into sunshine. He saw the birds flying. He looked at the sky, and he knew, even though he was free of Krosny, the ghetto he was in, he still had a sense of responsibility. He still had work to do. The theme of responsibility comes up again and again in comics narratives, particularly superhero narratives. I know most of you are probably familiar with Spider-Man's story and his theme of with great power comes great responsibility. I have found that in the stories of real people, real heroes, we see those same themes reflected. And so some of these choices were made, these narrative choices were made based on the accounts that the survivors gave us. Most often you'll see we depict things, we use their actual language that they gave us. Other times we have to take some creative license, but we always want to make sure that things are done with integrity and kept in the spirit of the stories that are being told. We go back to Malka's story. She's in the camp with the women, and one night they heard a child cry. There was a little boy. His name was David. He was 2.5, and they didn't know how he came to be in their camp. They never found that out, but they decided collectively to take care of him and to keep him hidden, because more often than not, children and older people were killed when they went to these camps. So they kept him hidden successfully for quite some time, for years. But then there was a day when their barracks were inspected by the commandant and his people. So this is him. His name was Stiglitz. He came to their barracks, and David was discovered. So all the women were made to stand at attention, and they were forced at gunpoint to stand there and witness. So Stiglitz took the child, and he put him on his bicycle, and he went off. And as far as the women knew, that was it, and he was going to be killed. So again, narrative choices, because we didn't know exactly how this looked, but we wanted to evoke the emotion of what was that going to be like? What would that have felt like to have been held hostage there, to have been so helpless, and to see this person that you loved taken away as far to their death? Everything there, from the sun passing to the shadows, these were all narrative choices that we made, and hopefully they worked to effectively convey the mood. But we didn't know for sure. This story comes from our first issue, and we really didn't know. So this sequence that you're about to see right here is one of my favorites of all of them. We see the women, and they're looking off to the side. They're seeing something, they're describing it impossible. Then we see Stiglitz's boots. He's walking back towards them. We see the wheels of his bike coming along as well. And then we see he has David. David's still alive. His eyes are filled with wonder, and his eyes, much like Miché's earlier, are watching the sky. And I included Malka's reaction to seeing him. They're all astonished to see that he was still alive. It was never understood exactly why he was kept alive, but he was. And as I was drawing this from Wayne's script, I tried to keep in mind that the child probably had no idea of what he managed to escape. He had no idea of what it meant to the women there to receive him back, that he was truly a miracle to them. I will say I wasn't sure if this was working, because you just wonder. And then my girlfriend came over and saw this. She knew I was working on this project. When I was working on it, I was working on this particular page late one night, and I had something happen to me that I've never had happen before or since. The enormity of what I was being entrusted to do, what all of the CHUTZ POW creators were being entrusted to do to keep these stories alive, it hit me while I was drawing this. I realized that this story was something that actually happened. This was a real thing. And my drawing hand started to shake, and I had to stop and compose myself. Took a moment, finished it. A day or so later, my girlfriend came over. She knew I was working on this, and I showed her this sequence. There were no words on the page, just the actions. And I looked over when she got very, very quiet, and I saw that she was crying. I wasn't happy to have made my girlfriend cry, but I was happy that the emotion got conveyed because that's what we wanted. This remains one of my favorite sequences of all the things that we've done because I think it just really effectively captures a moment that only these people were there to experience. So we go back to Miché's story. He joined a group of partisans in the forest. They were called the Mstitzel. It was the Russian word for revengers, and we opted to make that look much like an actual comic book cover. That's actually based on a comic cover of the character Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. So, and the word Revengers sounds like a comic book superhero group name, you know, the Defenders and the Avengers and the Revengers. And then we see some of the actions and things that they were involved in as they fought against the Germans. It was a hard life. But he also managed to get a message through to a farmer named Kowarski, to his family, with the goal of smuggling his family out of the ghetto. He was able to connect with them. He told them when to be ready, and he was able to save his mother, brother, and sister. Unfortunately, Miché's father and other sister perished. She was sick and suffering from typhoid in the ghetto, and when the Nazis destroyed that ghetto, they died in 1943. And so we frame that with him in the present, recalling this. It was a hard life for the partisans in the forest. They walked through swamps for 2 years, deeper and deeper in the swamps to evade the Nazis. He talked about what they had to do to survive. They slept while they walked. They had to strain muddy water through cloths so they could drink it. They foraged for food. It was a very hard life, but they managed to do it. And in 1944-45, they met with the Red Army, the Russian army on the Baltic front. We see that depicted, and we use comics are a medium of economy, so you have to make things really tight. So we use as much imagery as we can, much representative imagery as we can. So we see him meeting a Russian soldier. We see the tank. We see the Russian flag. So that communicates that that's them meeting the Russian army. We do much the same thing in the next panel. We see Miché meeting an American soldier when they met the U.S. Army near Hamburg, Germany in 1945. We see the soldier, we see the Jeep, we see the flag, and I have to mention, that soldier is based on a real person. That's based on the writer Wayne's father, Kevin Wise. So, yeah, Keith Wise. I knew I was going to do that. The K's get me. So his father was actually there. Now, this moment did not happen, but he was there at that time in that same place. And when that was realized, Wayne asked me if I could draw his father into this scene, which I was more than happy to do. It is in the spirit of the moment, and I'm happy to say that when Wayne's mother saw this, she verified that that looked like his dad at that time, which made me happy because that's the main person who I wanted to satisfy was the mom. So, and Miché and Wayne's dad and his mom, I have to point out, are all still alive, and they're all over 100. So, yay. The last panel we see in this sequence here is Miché in shadow. He has dismantled his gun, and that is meant to represent the end of the war for him. So we come back to Malka. We see she and the other women in her camp were liberated. So this is her and David walking out of the liberated camp. They had to live in abandoned apartments for a while. There was an older Jewish soldier named Isidore who helped them out when they left. David kind of went away. We don't have definitive information for what happened to David, so that's why we don't see him after that. It's believed that he went on and lived a good life. We don't know, and that's often the case with all these stories. But these stories reflect what we know. We strive for fidelity with everything that's depicted. So we see her. Another soldier sent a note, and she and a friend of hers met this soldier who took them elsewhere. They stopped at a barn. that one night, and the soldiers went into the barn to sleep, and they did not want to join the soldiers, Malka and her friend. So food was brought out to them. They were eventually convinced to come into the barn, to stay there, where they fell asleep, because you figure they'd had a long, hard journey by that point. When they woke up, they had been covered by a thick comforter blanket, and they came outside. There was sunlight, there was food, there was company. And Malka said that was where her belief in human kindness was reinvigorated. Like, I think that's where she began to see hope again. It was important for me to make this moment mirror visually the moment in Maché's story earlier, because we wanted there to be some resonance there with their stories. So then they met. And this all comes, what you're going to see now, from the last page of the story. They met at a displaced persons camp in Linz, Austria. Maché settled in the United States, where he worked in real estate management. Malka moved to Israel, where she earned a certificate in early childhood education. We found out later on, one of the students she taught there was another survivor that ended up here in Pittsburgh. And they did not know that for years until they had settled here. And a photograph, I believe, pointed that out. So, it's a small world. And here in Pittsburgh, everybody knows everybody. In 1952, Maché joined Malka in Israel. They got married. They came back to the States. They went to New York City. They began a new life. They raised a family. Then they moved to Pittsburgh in 1993, where they were active in the Jewish community and beyond, sharing their stories with the community. And we end with actual words from them. Hatred was the root of the Holocaust. Hatred makes you blind. To me, the greatest miracle is that I do not hate. I listen to good deeds and find good people. Good deeds are healing. It speaks for itself. And I'm so happy that we were able to do this immediately, like right out of the gate. We did something great that we were very, very proud of. CHUTZ POW works for us when it's used in school settings, scholastic settings, as a bridge between these stories, students, and then the Holocaust Center and the work that we do there. So we have often introduced students, groups of students and educators, to survivors in our community. This is a photo of survivor Irene Skolnick talking to a group of students at our former location a few years ago. We want students to hear their own stories. So by reading CHUTZ POW, you're able to have some understanding before you actually meet a survivor. Our survivors also, we don't have as many of them as we used to have. We are losing them. They are getting older, and they know that their stories, they don't want their stories to end with them. So while there was initially, when we were first working on CHUTZ POW, some caution about what we were doing, because they just didn't know, there was no precedent for this. Once they saw what CHUTZ POW was, once the first issue was printed, they have almost unanimously supported the project, which I'm very happy about. Like I said, we're able to introduce communities to survivors, but we're also able to introduce communities to the artists who tell these stories. This is artist Rachel Masalamani, a good friend of ours who has also worked on CHUTZ POW. These stories they are told by a multitude of creators. Like I say, it is a very inclusive group, and that's by design, because we want to make sure that people understand these stories aren't just for one group or type of people. They are for everybody. They represent everybody ultimately, and they can only really work and make that connection if you have all kinds of people telling the story. So we're always grateful to our CHUTZ POW creators. Thank you to all of you. We're also grateful to all of the people who have come to support CHUTZ POW, all of the students and educators. These are some students from Shaler High School who were present at an event and helping us get CHUTZ POW moved. And everybody has been wonderful about this. And I love interacting with students so much that's why I want more students to use this book and to use the series and just to read it. I have found this is the kind of series that you can read and love and understand, even without an educator to explain things for you. But if you have a great educator there who can explain things to you and help you understand more, that's the best situation you could ever ask for. CHUTZ POW has been an incredible educational experience for me, because I really didn't understand the Holocaust before I worked on this series. So I'm grateful to it because I've been able to learn. This photo I'm sharing with you, this is, so, I love comics and I love my work and I love this series, but you're not always sure that what you're doing is connecting. This photo, though, was taken a week or so after I had presented to these young people about CHUTZ POW. I'm Black and I am not Jewish. And there are times I have wondered if I've been able to connect with audiences, connect the experience, and connect the message correctly. And just so you know, all teenagers, I was one of you. You're sometimes hard to read. So I presented to this group, and I wasn't quite sure if I connected until a week or so later. I was at PNC Park watching a Pittsburgh Pirates game with some staff members. We were leaving the park, and this group of students saw me and remembered me. They chanted and called my name and descended on me. They really had taken what I'd had to say to heart, and that made me very happy. And then we brought them to the Holocaust Center afterwards. These are the things that I live for, making these connections and doing the work that makes these connections. I'm going to share with you what my favorite word is now. My favorite word is meliorism. I don't know if you've ever heard it before. It's an actual word. I did not make it up. The dictionary definition of meliorism is this: it's a noun, and it is the doctrine that the world tends to become better or be made better by human effort. So, in other words, if you think of, I think most of you know what pessimism is, and most of you know what optimism is. So think of meliorism as something that exists here, between the two, but closer to optimism. We have to do the work. We all have to do the work. The world isn't just, the world is a good place, but it's good because we make it good. I'm blessed because I've been able to use my artwork to help hopefully make the world a little bit better. We're not always all that blessed, but we have to put ourselves out there, and we have to do what we can to try and make the world better. And I've had a good life. I'm trying to advance these slides again. They're being a little temperamental. So what you will probably be seeing in a moment is me in the present with some of my other artwork. Yeah, there I am. So I do other things. I've created artwork for other things. All of them have some social aspect to them. And that's by design. I'm trying my best to make the world a better place. And I'm using the talents, my God-given talents, to do that. I really hope that all of you are willing and able to do much the same thing, because I know you can. And I want you to be able to share this series at some point and take these stories into account, because these stories are meant to be shared. They're meant to be your stories as well. That's why we've been given permission to share them. That's why we do what we do. Sorry, my slides are going a little slow, and I apologize for that. And I hope this next one comes up because it's really, really good. I'll tell you what you're going to see if it comes up. I work with the best team at the Holocaust Center that you could ever imagine. They are enormously supportive. They always have been. My current team members, and mad respect to my past co-workers as well, because I have worked with phenomenal people. So my other artists and writers who worked on the series, my other my team members at the center who have a host of duties. That's why I was hoping that would pop up, and maybe it'll still pop up. I don't know. But it is because of these combined efforts, along with our partners in the community, the educators and beyond, who help us do what we do, that we are able to do what we do and connect with the audiences out there like you. I see something coming up. Oh, here's a thank you. Let's see if this is them. I also want to thank some of the people who and organizations that I've been able to work with over the last year. I've done some things with ADL already this year. I did a presentation for the National Library of Israel, and all of our community partners who have allowed us to spread this message far and wide. Again, this doesn't happen. It doesn't happen without the help that we get from everybody. And I hope that you will become part of that network of supporters. I want you to read this book. I want you to tell people about this book, tell parents, tell educators, tell whoever you can about it, because it doesn't work without you. I want you to use your own power and your own responsibility to continue telling these stories and other stories like that. Look for the stories of people in your own community who are doing similar work. And I want to thank you again for coming to this summit, because none of this is possible without you. I am incredibly honored to be here and to do the work that I do. And I want other people to be able to do similar things. Nothing would make me happier than seeing other comics creators in the future doing what I do, creating works that talk about the things that need to be taken care of. In this case, anti-Semitism. In our own community, we still have a lot of work to do. Recently at a middle school, there was an incident where that had to be addressed, and one of the members of our community, she stepped up. This is somebody who we talked with, somebody who works with us, one of the teachers, and also child of survivors, and talked with the students out in this school district, and I believe spread a message that needed to be heard. We want you to help us do the same. Celeste, I'm going to ask Celeste to open things up so we can talk with some of our attendees. I'm sure some of you have questions or comments on what I've shared with you, and I'd love to hear and respond to what you have to say.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So our first question, or really was a comment, this was amazing, thank you. And the question is, I'm a teacher and I would love to bring CHUTZ POW into my classroom. How can I get copies, and do you have teaching or discussion resources to accompany it?
Aha. Oh, that's a great question. So CHUTZ POW is always available on Amazon. I just want to throw that out there. If anybody must get that series, get this series right now. It's available on Amazon. There is a what we call 3-pack where you get volumes 1 through 3 together, and then you can order volume 4 separately. We also have what we call digital CHUTZ POW, which is available via Kindle. And we also have a teacher's resource guide, which is enormous. I think it's enormously helpful. It comes with all sorts of resources. It comes with a glossary and supplementary material, curriculum assistance material. Between those things, those resources will really, I think, those are what educators need to implement this in their classrooms. You can also reach out to us directly because we are in the process. We're going to be doing some more things in the year ahead where we're going to make this even easier for educators to access CHUTZ POW. We're putting together what we're calling class packs where educators can order bundles of the book. So, and if you ever have any questions or any doubt, like if you want to get it and these other channels aren't meeting your needs, reach out directly to the Holocaust Center. One of these slides that you unfortunately didn't see had my contact information, but we are the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, hcpgh.com. Or you can type in my name, Marcel Walker. If you type in Marcel Walker comic books in your browser, I will come up. Sometimes all you have to do is type in M and I'll come up. So please reach out to me and we will get you the information you need. And also I want to say thank you to all the partners abroad who carry CHUTZ POW because there are a number of retail outlets with them we want to increase that have it available, including USHMM, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.
Thank you for that. And the next question is there one story that you wrote about in CHUTZ POW that really resonated with you, and what about it stood out to you?
Oh boy. So all of the stories mean a lot to me. And between volumes 2 and 3, that's when I joined the staff of the Holocaust Center. Volumes 1 and 2, I was one of the many artists who worked on it. And I drew the covers of every issue as well. And they're never taking that away from me. But I also worked very closely with Wayne and our original editor, Zach Zaffris, on this series. So I saw everything coming in, and I actually did a lot of the formatting for the books, and I've been very hands-on since day one. That's what led to my current role. So every story means a lot to me. And volumes 3 and 4 actually were produced under my editorial guidance. So I got to be even more hands-on. So this become even more personal to me. But to answer that question, I'm going to pick from volume 2, there's the story of social worker Arena Sendler. That is the one story that I have both written and drawn so far for CHUTZ POW. And that's probably the one, I say that because I was able to be so directly hands-on with telling her story. And I just became immersed in her history, what she did. Arena worked with a network of other activists and agents, and she was able to help rescue approximately 2,500 children from the Warsaw Ghetto. And she was also able to preserve a measure of their identities. The story is actually called Secret Identities because I went all in on the superhero imagery and theme, which was appropriate. Nurses at that time, like her, or social workers, nurses, they even wore capes. So visually, I was even able to depict her in the motif of a superhero. So that story will always resonate with me. Also, she was a very very human person. We tend to put people on pedestals when they do things like this. And I know I ask myself all the time, would I be able to rise to the occasion as they did? So many of them did. I like to think so. I don't know, but I do know for all the things she did, she was also human, just like everybody watching this, just like me. But she was still able to get these things done, and she lived to be in her 90s and to finally be celebrated for the work she did. So that's the one I would pick if I absolutely have to. But don't make me pick because I love them all.
So what are some up and coming projects that CHUTZ POW is working on?
So right now we are talking about just ways to expand the project. The more that we've produced CHUTZ POW, the more issues that we have produced, the more time it takes per issue. And I kind of marvel at the time frame that we produced that first issue in now, because it takes much longer. Now it takes generally a year to 18 months per issue. We're very much, well, there's more stories per issue, there's more pages per issue. There's a lot. It just takes a lot of time to make sure we get everything right, and we consult with more people. There is a plan for it. I would like to see many more issues. Well, a certain number more issues produced. Right now we have 4. I'll tell you all, I would like to see the series go to somewhere 9 or 10. There are different themes that I think there is still much room for exploration. But next year, we're going to work on expanding the project. And also capturing information back from people who have used the project. So for anybody out there who's maybe already encountered CHUTZ POW, read it, whether you're a student or a teacher or just a member of the general public who loves the series, and why wouldn't you not? What's not to love? We want to hear back from you. We want to capture information from you so we can do what we do even better and make it easier for educators and students to get the series.
Right. So the next question is, how do you suggest artists, especially young artists, use their platforms to push for social justice and change?
Ha! You know what? Oh, I love this question. First of all, don't wait. Don't wait. Don't wait for anybody to tell you what you can do, what you need to do. Don't wait. You can do it now. One of the best things about comics, just making comics, you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait. Like if you want to use if you want to like try your hand at comics, for instance, you don't have to wait. Just do it. I did it because my dad didn't want to draw pictures for me anymore. He said, go draw your own. And then once I did it, I realized, oh, I can do this. And I don't think I want him to do it for me anymore. And then somewhere in there, I realized very early on, human beings were making this work. I could be one of those human beings. Now, I had a lot to learn. When you're 6, you don't know how this works, and the landscape has changed a lot. But you don't have to wait. I didn't have to wait. You don't have to wait. I've taught literally hundreds of people about making comics, one of whom, in particular, has gone on to quite some acclaim. So don't wait, first of all. Second, you are all phenomenally intelligent people, and you know what's going on in the world right now. You see anti-Semitism, you see racism, you see sexism, you see ageism, you see all the isms. CHUTZ POW was created and exists to address anti-Semitism, but it also is a living work. It's meant to address what's happening in the world right now. It's an instructional book, much like the Montgomery story. So it's not just this thing that's an artifact of the past. It's meant to deal with what's going on right now. What lessons can I learn and apply to my world right now? You don't have to wait. If you see a story in your community, in your family, in your life, that you just feel that speaks to something that needs to be addressed, I need to get that out there. Don't wait. You can just do it. Now, it's great if you can find other people who share your goals. I was fortunate. The CHUTZ POW project, they actually reached out to me. I knew about it, so I was going to be involved, whether they didn't have a choice. Once I knew about it, I was going to be involved. But if you can find other people who share your interests, other people who might want to work on comics, other people who have your similar thinking about what needs addressed in the world, find those people, bring them into your fold, see if they will help you, and just start asking around. Because in your community, I guarantee you there are people who are thinking like you, who want to do what you do, who will be supportive of what you do. I'm supportive of what you do. I am. And, I'm here too. And if you have questions, reach out to me. If you have a question about comics, please reach out to me. It could just be something as simple as, hey, how can I start this? How can I start that? You all are afforded something I didn't have when I wanted to, when I was getting started, even when I was your age. You have the internet. And I personally believe technology is the thing that is making the difference in our world right now. We hear a lot of bad things about technology, and anything can be made bad in the wrong hands. But I'm going to tell you, in the right hands, it's amazing, it's empowering. You've got it. Please use it, and please use it responsibly.
And our next question, thank you for responding. I'm sorry. Our next question is, what was one of the challenges you've had to overcome in using comics for social good, and what did you learn from it?
Oh my gosh. Making being an artist, being a professional artist is hard. It can be really hard. The world doesn't I'm trying it's like we only got so much time, so I want to make sure I can hit this as fast as I can. It is, if you are an artist, you know it. If you know artists, I want you to always be aware. It is not easy being an artist. And I mean art, the entirety of the arts, writers and singers and dancers and poets and you name it. It is hard, and it is extra hard making that your vocation if you want to. So artists need support. I have always needed support. So that's been a big challenge. But actually, I've been very blessed. I've always had people who have supported me, family, friends, and just people who have entered into my orbit. Um, I have always had support. I have enormous support. I know there's a lot of people out there who know me right now who are watching this. Thank you. I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me and getting me to this place. Um, there's so many challenges. It's hard to actually go into to name them all, but I guess comics have had a big challenge, and that is the misperception of what they are. Comics are powerful. I could go on at length. I have in the past. I just want you, whatever anybody challenges you on, comics are powerful. They are just as worthwhile as every other form of art, communication, and media. And you can take that power into your own hands, even more, I think, than just about any other form of media.
So Marcel, thank you so much for such an inspiring discussion about how to approach social justice work creatively and innovatively. And to our participants, scroll down to find a list of ways you can take action in the fight against anti-Semitism and hate. So before we close, I just want to remind you to continue tuning in throughout the summit. Please click on the agenda button at the top of the website to see the full slate of panels. We hope to see you in an hour and a half at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, where Vice President Kamala Harris will commence our general opening session that includes an incredible lineup of speakers. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night. Thank you so much, Marcel.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Take care.